darkness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media
and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, the Hamilton Corner.
Welcome to a very special edition of the Hamilton Corner. Hi, Alex McFarland here. Very honored to be sitting in for attorney, cultural commentator, Pastor Abe Hamilton III. Alex McFarland here. So honored that you're listening. We have a great show today, folks, because we have two very insightful guests that you'll meet in just a moment. But as I sort of cue this up, you know, the year is drawing to a close, and when you look toward the new year coming in, very often it is common to reflect back on the past year going out. And I certainly think one of the elements of 2023 that will make the history books is the October 7 attack on Israel by Hamas. But really a related incident or related phenomenon that is associated with that is anti-Semitism. You know, recent years have seen so much in the news about social justice and about eliminating oppression and bias, right or wrong, depending on the issue. I mean, there have been so many voices in the news, but I want to be clear, and I've said this in many media interviews and in many media contexts. It's just ironic, the racism and the bias that seems to go by unchecked is animus against the Jewish people the world over. Now, we all know that, you know, throughout the centuries, wave after wave of persecution has come upon the Jewish people. But in our own lifetimes, bias and horribly, unspeakably unfair, and I'm just going to say it, immoral statements go in the news cycle just weekly against the nation of Israel, against Israel's right to exist, Israel's right to self-government as a sovereign nation. And ironically, as is so often the case with Islamic terrorism, it's time to blame the victim. Well, we're going to talk about this, and as we enter the new year, my call to action, even before I bring our guests on, you as a citizen, if you're a Christian or if you're not a Christian, but as an American citizen believing in the rights of all people, my call is that you would stay informed and have the courage to stand against and even speak out against anti-Semitism. And so we'll talk about this, and I'm very honored, very privileged to get a lot of insight, and I learn a lot from these two people. One is Jenny Kaiser. She's a documentary filmmaker and a producer, very talented individual. Jenny Kaiser has worked on a lot of projects, and she's got one thing that she's been working on is going to air on public television. That's quite an accomplishment. Women of the Shoah, and we'll talk about that. But then also Rabbi Eliezer Sneiderman, who I met several weeks ago in an interview. And you may recall in the news, the president of the University of Pennsylvania stepped down after making some anti-Semitic statements and not really being willing to go on record speaking against the Hamas attacks of October 7th. And Rabbi Sneiderman is, if I recall, an alumnus of the University of Pennsylvania. But both of these individuals will give us some insight, and they were willing to be on the program with us with kind of short notice. But Jenny Kaiser, Rabbi Eliezer Sneiderman, I welcome you both to the American Family Radio Network.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. Ellie, if I may call you Ellie, or do you prefer I call you Rabbi?
Sure. That's fine.
So help people understand how serious is the reality of anti-Semitism, and why should we realize that all of the fighting, you know, over in the Middle East and Israel defending itself, the nation of Israel, they're not the aggressors here, but give us a little bit of your background and why this is an important subject for everyone listening today.
Yeah, I think the students on campus today are really bearing the brunt of it in terms of anti-Semitism. And it's just, I think in your introduction, you said that there's, in certain circles, this kind of animus against the Jews is just allowed to run unchecked. Other groups, if there was any, words that made people uncomfortable or that there would be action taken. But somehow when it comes to the Jews, it's just allowed to go unchecked.
At what age did you become aware of this growing up? Are you from America originally? Yeah,
I'm from America. Growing up, I can't really say, that I experienced much overt anti-Semitism. There's probably some, kind of like implicit bias. I think looking back, there was only, one instance in my life where I had like a serious anti-Semitic incident, and that was, I was at school and we were watching. There was an ABC miniseries on the Holocaust, and I was watching that, and one of the kids said, I wish they would have killed all the Jews, and so we got into a fist fight. So but for all the years of my life to have that be the only incident, I don't think it was that bad. And I think that's why what's going on today is just is so shocking, because, we were told that we're moving into a society that doesn't allow, racism and has a special protections for minorities and oppressed classes, and then suddenly the Jews just aren't included in that, and it's it's very troubling.
I have to say, it really makes my heart heavy that you would say, well, it wasn't that bad. My goodness, racism shouldn't exist at all. I mean, the fact that you kind of would almost be resigned to, it was there, but it wasn't that bad. God bless you, my friend. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? I mean, it makes me sad that it would be like there's a certain racist quotient you have to accommodate yourself to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you get used to it.
Yeah. So is there a time, and Jenny Kaiser, you weigh in on this too if you want to, and I'm asking because I really don't know, but do Jewish parents at some age sit down with their children and say, by the way, here's the thing, we're Jewish and you're going to have to watch your back for the rest of your life? I mean, is there that conversation that Jewish parents have to inevitably have with their children?
Wow. I guess I'll tackle that one first. I think that yes and no. I don't think that it is as blatant and needed as our Black American friends who have the conversation about when you get pulled over by the police officer type of thing that I know happens. But there is a point, usually like close to bar mitzvah age. I know that's when I had it with my boys of, you have to be aware of your surroundings and you have to be cautious about who you're speaking with. And that there are people that don't like Jews and will not like you just because of your ethnicity. And I think that those conversations are definitely had, not to the same degree as other minorities, but they do happen.
Just sharing heart to heart here. Okay, I grew up in the South. My accent gives that away, I'm sure. But I remember one time I was, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, and myself and a friend ran to the store. We rode in the pickup truck with a neighbor, and as they were pulling into the parking lot, there was somebody walking, and we had to stop and wait for this person to just walk out of the way so the guy could drive. The dad of my friend, pull in the parking space. And the dad said something like, "Get out of the way, D, Jew." And I went home and asked my mother, and I said, "What is Jew?" I didn't know what that word meant. I'm like 6 or 7 years old. We're just riding in the truck with this guy. And my mom began to explain that the Jewish people were in the Bible, and God called Abraham. And my mom, that was like, to my recollection, the first knowledge I ever had of Jewish people. And my mother told me there are Jews and there are Gentiles. And the Jewish people God loves, and they're God's people. And God called Abraham to start the nation of Israel. And so the first memory I had of that, but isn't that something that just pulling in a parking lot, this man, and he's long since passed away, but he would just make an angry remark like, "Get out of the way." And that was just like a default general epithet to throw out about somebody. Anyway, that was my first awareness that there were Jews and Gentiles. Either one of you guys remember the first time that you became aware of there's a division of ethnicities in the world, and with that comes some static. Jenny, what do you remember?
Yeah, so I think the first time was I was 7 years old, and my great aunt, had just come back from a trip to Israel, and she brought me a pretty little Jewish star, and it was picture day, and I wanted to wear the star, and my mom said, "Sure." And so we were walking for pictures, and it fell off. The clasp didn't latch, and so it fell off, and I asked my teacher to put it back, and she threw it in the gutter, and I didn't understand why, and eventually she picked it up, and she helped me reclasp it. And I asked my mom, why would she be so hateful about not helping me put on a necklace? And she explained about anti-Semitism, and that there are people that don't like Jews. I want to take this second, though, as we're talking about anti-Semitism, to talk about the fact that I think that most people are just uneducated about anti-Semitism and different things that happen. For example, I was in my late 20s, and I was in the kitchen with a friend of mine, and she was talking about negotiating a deal for something. And this was a good friend. And she said, they tried to Jew me down. And I stopped, and I was like, okay, what do I say? And so I explained that phrase was anti-Semitic. And she tried to tell me, no, it's not. It's just a common phrase. And I said, no, that phrase is the equivalent of saying the N-word. If you wouldn't say the N-word, you don't say Jew me down. And it was a very difficult conversation. But I think that for her, it was a common phrase. It didn't have anything to do with anti-Semitism. It had to do with vernacular. So when we're talking about anti-Semitism, I like to, maybe this is naive on my part, but I like to take the stance of that when people say things, they don't necessarily know what they mean. And as hard as this is, it's also our job to be able to educate and to be able to say how hurtful some of these phrases are, even if they are just a vernacular and something that everybody says.
Wow. My guests here on this edition of the program are Rabbi Eli Sneiderman. Rabbi, is that short for Eliezer?
Yes, it is.
What? That's a Bible name. Yay.
Yes,
and Jenny Kaiser. We will continue getting to know Jenny Kaiser and Rabbi Eli Sneiderman. They're both of the Greensboro Jewish Federation, plus many other accomplishments. By the way, before this first break, Jenny, do you have the website of the Greensboro Jewish Federation?
Yep. We are shalomgreensboro.org. Shalomgreensboro.org.
Shalom, Greensboro. Alex McFarland, we're back after this.
My wife, Jan, played in the marching band in high school and then in college. They all had matching uniforms. But when they played the music, nobody played exactly the same thing. As believers, unity of the faith, we're not the same. We're different. We have different parts to play. But there can be unity as we play our part in Christ Jesus.
Exploring the Word, weekday afternoons at 3 Central on American Family Radio.
Sadly, as believers, we can be pretty self-centered and selfish about our prayers, praying for I, me, mine. The Lord taught us to pray the Lord's Prayer. It says, our Father. Not just simply my Father, but our Father. We need to pray much daily for each other and pray with one another as well. That's so very important for each and every one of us.
Tune in to the Hour of Intercession, weekdays at 3 a.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Little did you know that the same legal terminology, the same legal terms that we use today, probable cause, just cause, there's multiple ways to describe it, but David uses that same terminology. How do we know what's just? Well, we know what's just by looking at God's Word. That's where we get our ultimate definition of justice from.
AFA at the Core with Walker Wildman. Weekday afternoons at 1 Central on American Family Radio.
Some guy who claims to be a girl is not science. I'm sorry.
It's not.
You just can't claim to be something that you're not.
No, we don't allow people to choose their ethnicity.
No.
Or their age.
No, I can't say I'm an Eskimo, so provide me with a free igloo. We don't let people do that.
We don't.
You're a male, and you can't claim to be a female, because you're not.
Today's Issues, weekday mornings at 11 Eastern and 10 Central on American Family Radio.
Shining light into the darkness, this is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner. Alex McFarland here. Very honored to be sitting in for attorney, cultural commentator, Pastor Abe Hamilton III. If you recognize my voice, it's probably from the show Exploring the Word or on the NRB television network. Truth for a New Generation with Alex McFarland, but we're tackling a subject here, anti-Semitism on the rise again, sadly, and with us, filmmaker, documentary producer Jenny Kaiser and Rabbi Ellie Sneiderman, both of the Greensboro Jewish Federation, and both, first of all, I want to thank you both for being so gracious with your time and just being willing to speak about this and really to educate and motivate a lot of listeners because, guys, I really think that conservative Americans and certainly Christians to a large degree, overwhelming majority, love the Jewish people, care about the nation of Israel. It's been my privilege to participate in 2 Stand With Israel rallies in the fall of 2023. And let me just say, and I know, as a guy that I've had the privilege of speaking in 2,000 churches over the last 25 years plus, literally 2,000 American churches and nearly 200 college campuses. Now, colleges are a different story, but I can say with confidence, 99.999% of conservative evangelical Christians would say that they love the Jewish people, they support the state of Israel, and they wept over the October 7 attacks. And so, nevertheless, we can all learn, we can be educated. And I want to say to both of you, thank you for your time and your willingness just to speak so openly with us about the subject of anti-Semitism. I'm sincerely grateful. Jenny, I want to talk with you. You are a part of Women of the Shoah, and I want you to explain what that is. Now, do I have my Hebrew correct? Is Shoah disaster? Is that like women of the disaster? Is that what Shoah means?
So Shoah is what we term the Holocaust. It's the fire catastrophe So it's the Holocaust. It's the burning of people, and in Hebrew, Shoah means the catastrophe that happened to our people.
Right. And what is this project that you've been a part of, Women of the Shoah?
Sure. So in 2020, one of my friends who is a local artist, world-renowned local artist, decided that she wanted to do a sculpture of 5 women that a photograph was taken of them right before they were murdered in Liepaja, Latvia. And so she asked me to help her put together the fundraising effort and to do a video of the fundraising. That video helped us collect almost $1 million for this project. That then in turn helped us with securing money to actually make a full-length documentary that I did about the sculpture and about how the making of the sculpture. And we also included testimony from 3 different Holocaust survivors and what they had to go through, because most people were actually not killed in concentration camps. Most people were killed in the town square. They were rounded up from their beds, from their homes, taken to the town square, stripped, and then shot dead. So this film and this project really tells the story of what can happen when we look away, when we don't try to stand up for what we know is right.
And give us the website for that.
Sure. So it's Women of the Shoah, and Shoah is SHOAHJP.org. Women of the Shoah JP.org.
Has your documentary aired on public television yet?
It has not. So it will air on UNC TV on January 25th, and then it will be available on the PBS app after that. So we're really excited. We're also applying to film festivals across the globe for the full-length documentary film, so that people all over can witness the making of this monument and why it was so important, and then also hear the stories about the survivors.
You know, that's quite an accomplishment. I mean, I applaud you for being a part of this, because, you know, it's such a great statement and a wonderful thing to bring to people's awareness. But congratulations on landing your documentary on North Carolina Public Television. And hey, I appreciate them being willing to show it, but that really is an accomplishment. It's got to be pretty gratifying for you.
No, it's wonderful. It's, you know, just when you make something and you make something that's so close to your heart, and then you submit it and you have viewers being touched and motivated, you know, it's moving for me to see how people have changed and their perspectives have changed. And that's the important part.
Jenny Kaiser and Rabbi Sneiderman, let me ask you this, of the Holocaust, because I've dialogued with several students at university campuses over the last, say, decade, usually young 19, 20, 21-year-old Caucasian males that will just brazenly deny that the Holocaust ever happened. For one thing, I'm curious, how many Holocaust survivors are still living? Do you know?
Let me look it up for you.
And do you know? I don't know if this was. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So there's about 150,000 survivors living right now, and about 90,000 of them are women. But they're dying, and it's so important just to get their stories and their testimony on tape, just so that other generations can actually hear it.
You know, either one of you could speak to this, but I once read that only about 10% of the Germans that ever worked in the concentration camps were ever put on trial. That's kind of troubling. So just like today with anti-Semitism, I also read that since the October 7 attacks on Israel, that incidents of overt anti-Semitism have increased in America by almost 400% over the previous 12 months. And that, just celebrities, for instance, and I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of her name. I apologize. Jenny, correct me if I say this wrong. Mayim Bialik of Jeopardy was let go in early December of 23. She very accomplished individual, an actress, television host, a neuroscientist, actually, brilliant lady, but very outspoken in support of Israel. And Sony Television said, well, it's just time to make some changes. But even as I was prepping for this show, I was reading how, the whispers throughout Hollywood is, Mayim Bialik, she's out of her job on TV. Very likely a part of that decision was her support for Israel. So, speak about this. What would you both like American citizens to know, and what could people do about this? Rabbi, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, you had asked earlier, like, when did you first become aware of anti-Semitism? And I think October 7th, for me, was like a wake-up day, because there was kind of like implicit bias, a covert, occasional word here or there, but it wasn't anything like overwhelming. And, I think since October 7th, it's really changed. There's thousands of people marching in the streets, screaming, words that you basically call for the genocide of the Jews. And it just feels totally different than it did before October 7th. Mm-hmm. And I would say this, I think that there's this idea that you have to choose a side, that it's either, it's either one or the other, and then all we want to do is cancel, the person. And I think you can cry for the loss of both sides, and I don't think it has to be this kind of like either or choice.
Mm-hmm. What do average Americans need to know about the political and terrorist situations in Israel? I mean, what are some facts about Israel and their right to the land that you're not going to hear on the mainstream media news, Rabbi?
Well, I think one is that the Jewish people are indigenous to Israel, and they have they've been there over 2,000 years, and that there have been remnants that never left. So since biblical times, there are Jews that have never left Israel. So it's not this idea of a colonial people. I think that's a misnomer.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that there was a ceasefire on October 6th, and Hamas broke the ceasefire in a kind of horrific way. So,
yeah. Well, I've had people say, they should just stop. They should just cease fire. But, look, Israel didn't start this conflict. One of the core parts of Western thought, for 2,000 years has been that nations and individuals have the right to self-defense. And so if Hamas would cease fire, conflict is over. If Israel were to cease fire, Israel would eventually get exterminated. I mean, so help people, Jenny or Rabbi Sneiderman, either one, weigh in on this. Help people understand it's just not even fair to insist on a ceasefire when Israel here is not the aggressor.
Yeah, well, I think you have to also look. I mean, Jenny, you can speak to this too, but there are hostages.
Yeah.
That need to be released. So any ceasefire that doesn't call for the release of hostages is just not even worth thinking about.
Yeah. Jenny, if you would continue, what do you think that young people need to understand, especially that, and my heart just breaks of kids going to these hyper woke, hyper liberal universities, and we'll get to Harvard and the Ivy League here in a minute. But what can parents tell their kids? Look, regardless of your spiritual or political, leanings, I mean, just in the spirit of humanity and justice for all, what would you like for parents to be telling their children?
I think that there's a few things. First, that this war is not against the Gazan people. This war is against Hamas. And that Hamas is not really great to the Gazan people at all. They get hundreds of millions of dollars a year from Israel, from the U.S., from other countries affiliated with the UN, and the Gazan people are living in poverty. The conditions that the Gazan people are living in they're horrific. And it's not that their government doesn't have funds to help the people. They use those funds to build tunnels, to buy weapons, to attack Israel. So you have this government that is not looking after their people and then scapegoats and says the reason you're in poverty is because of Israel, when they have money to help their people and they're choosing not to. I think that's important. The other part of this is that, women living in Gaza are huge. They're under a thumb of laws that say that they have to be under the guardianship of men, that women do not have equal rights in Gaza, that women cannot go out without their heads covered, that they don't have the freedoms that we here in the United States and the freedoms that women have in Israel, they don't have. And so we need to have some empathy for the people of Gaza, that this is not against the people of Gaza. This is against Hamas. And Hamas is hurting Jews in Israel, they're hurting Arabs in Israel, and they're hurting Arabs in Gaza. So I think that's the biggest thing that parents should be talking to their kids about. I think it's also important to note that while we can be critical of how Israel is handling this, we don't have all of the information, and we don't have the education to be able to say, this is the way we should be handling it better. Let's just take a step back and say, if this has happened in the U.S., right? So the United States is 33% larger than the state of Israel. So for the 1,200 people in Israel that were killed, that would be 40,000 people in the U.S. 7,000 people in Israel were injured on October 7th. That's more than 230,000 people in the U.S. 240 people were kidnapped. That's about 8,000 people in the U.S. So if we had had those numbers in the U.S., let's say a foreign country attacked the U.S. and 40,000
Hey, forgive me, Jenny. Forgive me for interjecting. Hold that thought. I want to pick up on this because you're right. The proportions eye-opening here. Obviously, America, had it been here, would react strongly. We've got to take a break. We're back after this. Stay tuned.
Whether it's a story about prayer in public schools or battles for biblical truth within our denominations, the American Family News Network is here to tell you what the newsmakers are saying.
We are starting to see a rebellion against corporate America's endorsement, coddling of the LGBTQ agenda.
The American Family News Network is comprised of news anchors and editors that team up to bring you news from a Christian perspective.
A TRO, for non-legal types out there, is basically just an emergency order that would have allowed Liam to go back to school wearing the t-shirt he wants to wear. And again, that t-shirt says there are two genders.
Not only can you listen to reports on the radio, but you can also visit afn.net for coverage of the latest headlines,
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, out on the campaign trail, was ready with an answer on the meaning of the word woke.
American Family News. Reporters you can trust.
The birth of Jesus is the most pivotal moment in human history, but do we really understand the importance? In the Turning Point production, Why the Nativity, Dr. David Jeremiah answers some of the most poignant questions about the birth of the Savior.
What was it about the vast Roman Empire that was ideal for the coming of Christ? The Romans themselves unknowingly were part of the answer.
Get a new perspective on the Nativity story.
One can only picture the scene Mary and Joseph first encountered as they approached the gates of Bethlehem. Travelers clamoring for lodging. Records from ancient history corroborate the star event over Bethlehem, and that these visitors came from the most unexpected of places.
AFA Streaming is pleased to offer Why the Nativity through the end of the year. Stream it as much as you'd like and share the Nativity story with your family, friends, or even your small group. Sign up today at streaming.afa.net.
The Hamilton Quarter podcast and one-minute commentaries are available at afr.net. Back to the Hamilton Quarter on American Family Radio.
We're back on the program talking with documentary filmmaker Jenny Kaiser, Rabbi Eli Sneiderman of the Jewish Federation of Greensboro. We're talking about anti-Semitism. Before the break, Jenny Kaiser was giving some amazing comparative statistics, and I want her to pick up on those. But you know, the funny thing, not funny, but ironic, even as we're recording this broadcast, I'm reading a news feed about the Jewish Federation of Nashville, Tennessee, have email threats, Jewish-related entities all around the city of Nashville getting anti-Semitic emails and threats, having to put their staff on alert. It just seems every day there's more in the news, more animus and hatred toward Jewish people, helping us get an insight on this and what we could do about that. Rabbi Eli Sneiderman and Jenny Kaiser. And folks, I want to remind you that this show, in addition to airing live, is on afr.net, as in AmericanFamilyRadio.net, and look for the December 29th program of the Hamilton Corner. And I would ask you to share this with people because, as I said before the break, regardless, spiritually, politically, conservative, non-conservative, Christian, non-Christian, anti-Semitism is a racism that should not be allowed to exist unchecked. Jenny, you were saying before the break, without animus or hatred toward anybody, just in the spirit of civil rights and justice for all. Why should the Jewish people be singled out for hatred and racism that goes unanswered? But Jenny, before the break, you were giving some comparative statistics, and I thought that was pretty eye-opening. If the October 7 attack by Hamas on Israel had it happened in America, this would be the numeric equivalencies. That was pretty interesting. Would you mind restating that, Jenny?
Sure. So there were about 1,200 people killed in Israel. That would have been 40,000 people in the U.S. There were 7,000 people injured. That would be more than 230,000 here. 240 people were kidnapped. That would have been about 8,000 people in the U.S. So, I think it's really easy to say for people to be critical of Israel that it's disproportionate or that they shouldn't be attacking Hamas in Gaza. But what would the United States government be doing if that had happened here and those were our numbers? How would we as a society want our government to react? And what would we want them to do? And I think before you can be critical of Israel and how they're responding, put it into those terms and think critically about if it was here.
Of course, America we would assume that America would respond and retaliate. Rabbi Sneiderman, let me ask you this. Support for Israel doesn't mean that we can't respectfully and reasonably sometimes disagree with positions or policies. It's almost like this either or. Either you support Israel or you are against Israel. Just because we support Israel's right to exist and self-government and self-defense doesn't mean that people can't follow the news and respectfully critique or disagree with certain positions that Israel might take, right?
No, 100%. And, we saw over the summer where, the Netanyahu government wanted to change the way the Israeli Supreme Court was structured, and there were millions of people in the street protesting that change. But it was a peaceful protest, and it was, under democratic principles, and there wasn't spray painting or violence. It was peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think if you look at what happens in Gaza, if you come out against Hamas, it says you may not live to see another day.
Yeah, I mean, respectful disagreement is just not allowed, is it?
No, we were in they were talking about doing a resolution in the city council, and they said, "Well, we can't really mention Hamas or October 7th, or else the families, our loved ones in Gaza, might be in danger." Do you think about that? How could it be? Here we have that violence, that threat of violence is just changing the whole perception of reality, and it's just not really focused on that much.
And it's ironic. I'm not going to say it's funny. It's not funny. It's just, in my view, tragically ironic that mid-December 2023, as you know, people around the world are talking about the rights of Israel and just grieving over the rise of anti-Semitism. The Biden administration put out a statement condemning Islamophobia. And, I'm like pulling my hair out. Islamophobia, that is not the problem. Jenny, how do you respond if, someone speaks against terrorism or Hamas specifically, and you're accused of hate or phobia? Why are you hateful, or are you Islamophobic? Nobody's hateful. Nobody's being fearful. But right is right and wrong is wrong. How do you respond to critiques like that aren't substantive at all?
I think that it depends who it is, right? If it's somebody that I have a relationship with, then I might start pulling out statistics about what Hamas is doing to the Gazan people. That to go back to the rabbi's point about not being able to speak out in Greensboro, North Carolina, about Hamas because you're scared for your family in Gaza. To pull up those facts, there are people that are using this war and anti-Zionism to mask their already held beliefs about anti-Semitism. And those you can't combat. If somebody is just blatantly anti-Semitic and they're using this war as their reasoning for being anti-Semitic, there's nothing you can say or do. And you just kind of have to walk away. And unfortunately, there's a lot of walking away. I tell my boys all the time on college campuses, if you hear somebody saying something anti-Semitic or anti-Zionist, don't engage. They want a fight. They're picking a fight with you. Just walk away. And go to the people that are not Jewish, that are your allies, to have them help you with this, because you standing up for yourself in that arena is not going to be beneficial.
Well, just the word Zionism, I never see that word used in the press in a positive sense. I mean, that word, which should be a wonderful word, in my opinion, a venerated word, but that's a pejorative term, the way it's used in the press. I mean, it's almost exclusively used in a negative way to marginalize people. So I want to ask you both if you would educate us a little bit. The word Zionism or Zionist, ideally, what meaning should we associate with that word?
So Zionism is the movement for the self-determination and statehood for the Jewish people in our ancestral homeland, the land of Israel. Mm-hmm. Period. And I think that it's important to realize that when we're talking about Zionism and we're talking about the Jewish people, we're not saying religious Jews. There are a lot of secular Jews living in the state of Israel. We're talking about an ethnicity. I've mentioned to you before that the opposite of a Jew in Israel is not a Christian or a Muslim. The opposite is an Arab, and you have Arab states all over the Middle East. All of them, except for one, is either Arab, and you have one other one that is Persian, right? So it's not this idea of religious, it's this idea of ethnicity. And Zionism is saying that Jews have the right to self-govern, that Jews have the right to be in control of their own destiny and to have a homeland in their ancestral lands.
And, you know, it's worth pointing out that in the aftermath of the October 7 attacks, the neighboring Arab states refused to take Gaza refugees. So, you know, folks, let's remember that as Israel defends itself militarily, you know, when benevolence and relief could come to fellow Arabs from neighboring Arab states, the Arab states refused to do that. Rabbi Sneiderman, what about the term anti-Semitism? I mean, tell us Semitic, that word referring, you know, things relating to the Jewish people. Give us some backstory and education on the term Semitic or anti-Semitic.
Right. So I'm just looking up the history. Anti-Semitic was invented by the Nazis because it gave kind of like a rosy veneer to Jew hatred.
Okay.
It's not. It seems less. Where you could talk about Jew hatred and give it almost kind of like a scientific kind of feel to it.
Am I right?
Not really. Yeah.
Well, Shem in Genesis 11. So the Jewish people are descended from Shem, one of Noah's sons, right?
Yes.
So I'm just trying to, in my mind, put the words here. Anti-Shemite, shall we say, would be animus against the sons of Shem. Is that fair to conclude?
Yeah, but it's not really. So it's a misnomer because Semite would also include Arabs and Assyrians and Aramaeans and other people from that area, but it's not right. Because think about it: if it was anti-Semitism was really an accurate word, then you wouldn't have to have every sentence be anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Because really anti-Semitism, if it was properly used, would really also refer to anti-Arab feelings.
Right.
So anti-Semitism would cover both of them. But I think
that's true.
But it doesn't, because it's really just another name for Jew hatred. And it was...
Because in the minds of people, it wouldn't include the sons of Ishmael, would it?
No, I mean, if it was accurately used, right, then it should, but it's not.
Right, exactly. So it might sound harsh, but it's true. I mean, that's like you say, a glossed up word to mask Jew hatred. That's stark, but that's accurate, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of people don't even know what anti-Semitism is. It's like, if you ask someone who's younger, like a Gen Z, what's anti-Semitism? I mean, it's just not. Jew hatred is a stronger word.
Yeah. So let me ask this: give a word, if you guys, and I, just as forthright and impassioned as you feel led to be. I know we have a lot of Christians listening, a lot of pastors. I'm a Christian. I've pastored 2 churches. What can Christians and Christian leaders do? Maybe open up the church for an evening of dialogue. And folks, let me encourage you, this is a time for moral courage and moral clarity. What could we do? Have a lecture, have an open house. I wish we had another hour. Jenny, what call to action would you give to Christians and pastors?
I think that really go to standwithus.com. They've got some really great information on how you can stand up against Jew hatred. You can go to standuptojewhate.org. They also have some great information, and really reach out to your neighbors. If there's a synagogue in town, talk to the rabbi. Say, what can we do to help you? And really start the conversation of that we don't stand up for any hate, especially at this time of Jew hatred.
Wow, just about out of time. Rabbi Eli Sneiderman, documentary filmmaker Jenny Kaiser, thank you. God bless you.